The night Jane told Sam she didn't love him anymore and was leaving him for her ex, he stood silent at the door, heart shattered. But what she thought was a bold move toward a better life was actually a trap. She didn't know it yet, but her fall was coming fast. And Sam, he wasn't just going to survive. He was about to rise. And when he did, everything would change. "I don't love you anymore, Sam. I'm going back to Josh." Those were the words that cracked 10 years of marriage in half. Jane didn't yell, didn't cry. She just said it flatly, grabbed her bag, and walked out. Sam Carter stood motionless at the doorway of their Atlanta apartment, watching the woman he built a life with disappear into the night, into another man's arms. Jane had always been ambitious, high energy, drawn to risk. Sam was the opposite, methodical, calm, dependable. He worked as a project manager, the kind of guy who never missed a bill, remembered anniversaries, and stayed loyal no matter how rough life got. But none of that mattered anymore. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even an argument. It was an announcement. The week before she left, Sam had started noticing changes. Jane's phone was suddenly always face down. Her laughter felt distant. She'd smile at messages she didn't show him. She started coming home late with vague excuses and a strange kind of excitement in her voice. But nothing prepared him for the moment she told him she was done. Josh. That was the name Sam hadn't heard in years. Jane's ex-boyfriend, the one who cheated on her in college, the one she swore she'd never speak to again. Apparently, he was back in town, and from the sound of it, he hadn't just reappeared. He'd reignited something. Sam tried to reason with her. "We've built a life together. 10 years, Jane. We've been through layoffs, deaths, hard times. You're really throwing it all away for someone who once destroyed you?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "I need something more." She was gone within days. She didn't ask for the furniture, didn't cry, didn't hesitate. What she left behind wasn't just an apartment full of memories. She left behind a man who had sacrificed for her, supported her, and believed in forever. The silence that followed was unbearable. Sam wandered through the rooms like a ghost. Her scent still lingered. Her favorite coffee mug sat untouched. But it all felt toxic now, tainted by the image of her walking away without a second thought. Friends called to check in. His sister dropped by with takeout. They all said the same thing: "You're better off." But that kind of comfort doesn't land when your world has collapsed in a single sentence. And while Sam stared at his hollow apartment wondering what went wrong, Jane was already moving into a luxury loft with Josh. To Jane, it felt like a dream. Josh was charismatic, confident, full of promises. He told her she was brilliant, that Sam had held her back, that she deserved more. He spoke like a visionary, pitching her on a new joint venture, something that would take her fashion business to the next level. She bought every word, especially because she had just closed the biggest contract of her career. A high-end fashion distributor had wired her a six-figure advance, money she believed would launch her into the upper echelons of success. And Josh? He seemed to be the perfect partner. But Jane didn't see what Sam could have told her if she had asked. Josh wasn't looking for love. He was looking for a payout. While Jane toasted champagne in her new loft, Sam was unraveling inside, not because he still wanted her, but because the betrayal didn't make sense. He had been loyal. He had built their life brick by brick, and she had walked away like it meant nothing. He could have sunk, could have gotten bitter, but instead something else clicked. Enough. If Jane could throw away 10 years, then he could throw away the fantasy of winning her back. Sam wasn't going to beg, he wasn't going to chase, and he sure as hell wasn't going to let one person's betrayal define him. He shaved, cleaned the apartment, started hitting the gym again. Then he dusted off his old resume and sent out applications. Somewhere deep inside, he felt it. Not rage, not revenge, just resolve. He wasn't going to survive this. He was going to rise from it. And Jane? She had no idea that her decision, the one she thought was bold and freeing, was actually step one in a trap. Josh had seen her bank balance before he'd seen her smile, and when the money started to run dry, so would his affection. But that part of the story was still coming. For now, all Sam knew was that the woman he had loved more than anything had chosen someone else. And this time, instead of holding on, he was letting go. Not because he wanted to, but because he finally understood something she never did. Love without respect is just captivity. The first Monday after Jane left, Sam woke up to a silence that felt heavier than usual. Not just quiet, but hollow. The kind of quiet that seeps into your skin. Still, he got up, showered, made breakfast, forced himself to eat, even if it tasted like paper. It wasn't about feeling better. It was about moving. He spent the next few days reaching out to old contacts, mentors, former coworkers, updated his LinkedIn profile, applied for positions he'd always considered out of reach. Somewhere between desperation and hope, Sam found momentum. Meanwhile, across town, Jane was busy falling deeper into Josh's world. It all looked perfect at first. Sleek loft, city views, expensive wine. Josh had connections, or at least he made it seem that way. He introduced her to investors, took her to high-profile parties, dropped names she vaguely recognized. It was intoxicating, and it felt earned. After all, she'd brought in a major contract, one that paid up front and promised even more. She deserved this. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. Josh agreed. He made sure she heard it often. "You're powerful, Jane. You've outgrown safe little Sam. You need someone who can match your ambition." Jane nodded, soaking it in. The rush of validation drowned out the voice in her head that occasionally whispered, "Why does he ask so many questions about your payout?" She ignored it. Until one night, while signing paperwork for the next phase of her fashion deal, Josh leaned over her shoulder and asked casually, "How much of that advance is left?" Jane laughed. "Enough. Why?" Josh just smiled. "Just curious. Sounds like we've got some serious capital to play with." That was the first time her fingers hesitated on the pen. Back in his one-bedroom apartment, Sam landed an interview with a major consulting firm. He walked in wearing the same suit he wore to his wedding, tight in the shoulders now, but he wore it with purpose. When the hiring manager asked about his recent career gap, Sam didn't make excuses. "My marriage ended. I took a hit, but I've done the work to rebuild. I'm ready to lead again." That honesty landed. The next day, they called him back. A week later, he was offered the job. 6 figures, bonuses, health benefits that didn't feel like handcuffs. Sam accepted without hesitation. At home, he poured a single glass of bourbon. Not to celebrate, but to mark the end of survival mode. He wasn't just getting back on his feet. He was stepping into something better. Jane, meanwhile, was beginning to see the cracks. Josh's charm had an expiration date. The compliments started thinning out. He became harder to reach, harder to read. Dinners turned into takeout. Nights out became nights working late. His phone, once left casually on the counter, was now always in his pocket. Locked, silent, buzzing at odd hours. One evening, Jane asked, "You've been distracted lately. Everything okay?" Josh smiled without looking up from his laptop. "Just business stuff. Don't stress." But she did, especially after a call from her bank. "Miss Anderson, we're reaching out about unusual activity on your account." She froze. When she checked her statements, the withdrawals were small, strategic, but consistent. Thousands missing, transferred to a joint project fund she didn't remember approving. Her stomach sank. She confronted Josh. He didn't deny it, didn't even pretend to be surprised. "You let me handle the finances," he said casually. "You're too busy with your career." "I thought that's what you wanted." Jane tried to push back, but Josh's tone turned sharp. "You wanted a partner, right? Well, this is how real partnerships work." Something broke inside her. Not fear yet, but a shift. She started checking more often, asking questions, watching. That's when she found the text. Late one night, Josh's phone lit up while he was in the shower. Jane glanced. The name wasn't saved, but the messages were intimate, familiar, not business. Her heart raced. She didn't say anything that night, or the next. Instead, she smiled through gritted teeth, nodded when he said he needed another bridge loan, gave him access to her last account. Temporarily, she told herself. But the truth was starting to settle in like cold air through a cracked window. She wasn't living in a partnership. She was being siphoned emotionally and financially. And across town, Sam was rising. He had started working with Laura, an old acquaintance from Jane's college days, now a marketing director at a sister firm. They'd crossed paths during a corporate mixer. She recognized him first. "Sam Carter? You look different," Sam smiled. "That's the goal." They talked, then they kept talking. Laura was smart, sharp, but most of all, real. She didn't pity him. She respected him. When she learned what happened with Jane, she didn't flinch or gloat. She just listened. That was the first thing that caught Sam off guard. Respect. It wasn't something he'd realized he'd been missing until he felt it again. Jane, meanwhile, was unraveling. The account was nearly empty. Her clients started complaining, emails unanswered, deadlines missed. Josh had vanished for an entire weekend, then returned with a weak apology and a list of excuses. She snapped, "I want my money back." Josh's response was brutal. "You gave it to me, Jane, and honestly, you should be thanking me. Without me, you'd still be stuck playing house with your mediocre husband." Her hands shook as she picked up her phone and stared at Sam's contact info. But she didn't dial. Not yet. Pride has a way of holding people hostage, and Jane was still convinced she could fix this. That maybe Josh would turn around, that maybe Sam would be waiting, just in case. What she didn't know was this. Sam wasn't waiting, and by the time she finally reached out, she wouldn't be walking into forgiveness. She'd be walking into consequences. Jane didn't remember the moment it all truly collapsed. It wasn't a single event, it was a sequence. Her business partner threatened legal action over missed deliverables. A major client pulled out, credit cards maxed, and then, the final blow, Josh disappeared. No text, no warning. Just gone. She returned to the loft one afternoon and found his clothes missing, his laptop gone, and a printed note on the counter. "Thanks for everything. Don't call me." The loft, once vibrant with activity, now echoed with emptiness. Jane stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the spot where he used to sit and pretend to love her. She didn't cry right away. She was too stunned for that. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that she had been played. She checked her accounts. Zeroed out. She called the bank. They confirmed the transfers had all been authorized under shared access. Nothing illegal, nothing she could undo. Jane had traded 10 years of loyalty for a fantasy that stole everything. That night, she sat in the dark, staring at Sam's contact again. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She typed, "I made a mistake. Can we talk?" Then deleted it. Instead, she poured another glass of wine and promised herself tomorrow would be better. But the calls from creditors kept coming. So did the silence from everyone who used to orbit her life. Without money, Jane learned, she was invisible. Eventually, hunger overruled pride. She called Sam. When he answered, his voice was calm. Too calm. "It's me," she said, barely above a whisper. I need to see you." A pause, then, "Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Peachtree Cafe." Jane wept after the call ended. It wasn't relief, it was fear. The next evening, she arrived early. She had nothing left but her last decent outfit, in a trembling hope that forgiveness might be possible. Then she saw him. Sam looked different. Not just physically, though he stood straighter, moved with confidence, but something deeper. He wasn't the same man she'd left. The weight she'd once seen in his eyes was gone. She opened her mouth, ready to speak, but someone else got there first. "Jane!" The voice came from the woman sitting next to Sam. Laura, her old college best friend. The one she hadn't spoken to in years. The one who'd disappeared from her life the same way Sam had. Laura's hand was resting on Sam's. Jane froze. "What is this?" she asked, her voice thin. Sam didn't flinch. "This is Laura. We've been seeing each other." "You're dating her?" Jane snapped, anger overriding pain. "My best friend?" Laura remained composed. "Correction. I was your best friend. Until you cut everyone off for Josh. Until you burned every bridge." Jane turned to Sam. "You'd seriously throw away everything we had for this?" Sam's reply was measured. "You threw it away, Jane. Not me. I begged you to stay. I tried. And you made your choice. Now I've made mine." Jane's chest tightened. She hadn't expected this. She had come assuming there'd be pain in his eyes. maybe even regret. Instead, she saw peace. The conversation ended shortly after that. Jane walked out of the cafe humiliated, rage boiling beneath her skin. But she wasn't finished. The next day, she showed up at Sam's apartment. When he opened the door, he didn't look angry, just wary. "Jane, what are you doing here?" Her voice trembled. "I made a mistake. I was wrong. About everything. Josh used me. He took everything. But you always loved me. Please, Sam, let's fix this." Sam didn't invite her in. He listened. Then he shook his head. "When you left, you didn't just hurt me. You made me feel like I wasn't enough. You destroyed my trust, Jane. That doesn't come back with an apology." She reached for his hand. "I still love you." He pulled back. "It's not about love anymore. It's about respect. And Laura, she respects me in ways you never did." That name again, Laura. It hit Jane like a slap. "You choose her over me?" Sam's expression didn't change. "You chose Josh over me. That choice has consequences." Days passed. Jane sent messages, left voicemails. She stood outside his office. She tried every door. Sam didn't budge. Laura stayed patient, but one night during a walk through Piedmont Park, she finally spoke. "She's not going to stop," Laura said gently, "and I don't want to stand in the middle of something unresolved." Sam didn't hesitate. "She's the past. You're my future." Back in her shrinking world, Jane sat on the floor of her nearly empty apartment, surrounded by unpaid bills. Her fingers hovered over her phone one last time. She whispered his name into the silence, but there was no one left to hear it. Jane didn't sleep for days. The walls of her loft, once spacious, now felt like they were closing in. The unpaid bills stacked higher. The fridge was nearly empty. Every time her phone buzzed, it wasn't Sam. It was another debt collector. She ignored most of them, but the ones she did answer weren't sympathetic. She had nowhere to go. Josh had drained her financially and vanished without a trace. Her business was in freefall. Her name, once respected in local fashion circles, was now whispered as a warning. Don't trust her. She missed deadlines, burned bridges, disappeared when it counted. Her reputation was wrecked, her savings gone, her future uncertain. And then she saw it. Scrolling through social media, she found the post. A photo of Sam and Laura at a formal event, arms around each other, laughing. The caption read, "Sometimes the right people come when you're finally ready to receive them." Her stomach twisted. Then came the second post, a picture of a ring on Laura's finger. The comments were flooded with congratulations. They were engaged. Jane dropped the phone. Her hands trembled. The one person she thought might still be there, the one she left thinking he'd never leave her, was gone. Not physically, emotionally, permanently. The next morning, she put on the last nice dress she hadn't sold and walked to Sam's apartment. She didn't have a plan, just a desperation she couldn't contain. When he opened the door, she didn't wait for an invitation. "I saw the post," she said quietly. Sam didn't respond. "I get it now. I lost you. But it wasn't supposed to end like this." "You ended it," Sam said. "You just didn't expect me to move on." "I didn't think you'd end up with her," Jane said, bitterness creeping in. "Why not?" Sam asked. "Laura saw me. She stood by me. She didn't abandon me for someone offering fast cash and fake promises." Jane swallowed hard. "You think I don't regret it? You think I don't wish I could go back and undo everything?" Sam looked her in the eye. "Regret doesn't rebuild trust, and it doesn't undo betrayal." She stepped closer. "What if I could change? What if I proved it?" "You had your chance," he said. "Now it's Laura's turn." She didn't cry, not yet, but her shoulders slumped. The fire she used to carry had burned down to ash. She turned, walked away without slamming the door. But the story didn't stop there. In the weeks that followed, Jane spiraled. She showed up at Sam's office once. Security asked her to leave. Another time, she left a letter at his door. Pages of apology, memories, promises. He didn't respond. Laura stayed composed but couldn't hide the tension. She didn't feel threatened. She trusted Sam, but she was exhausted by the shadow Jane kept casting. One evening, she finally asked the question that had been building. "Are you sure this is over for you?" Sam didn't flinch. "Yes, because with you, I finally know what peace feels like." That night, he deleted Jane's number for good. Meanwhile, Jane's world kept shrinking. Her car was repossessed. Her landlord issued an eviction notice. Her parents, once supportive, now sent her links to job listings and gently pushed her toward reality. Still, she couldn't shake the image of Sam with Laura. Not because she hated Laura, but because she had thrown away something solid for an illusion. She started writing in a journal, if only to stay sane. The first page read, "I don't know who I am without him." But over time, even the bitterness faded. What remained was shame and clarity. Then came the wedding. Jane wasn't invited. Of course not. But she found out the date through mutual friends. She told herself she wouldn't go, that it would only make things worse. But the morning of the ceremony, she got dressed, took a cab she could barely afford, and sat quietly in the very last pew. She didn't plan to cause a scene. She just needed to see it with her own eyes, to witness the life she had forfeited. Laura walked down the aisle. Sam waited with steady eyes and a calm smile. When they exchanged vows, Jane finally let the tears come. Quiet, steady, unrelenting. She stayed until the end, then slipped out before anyone noticed. Outside, leaning against the church wall, she whispered to herself, "I did this. I traded loyalty for lies." There was no dramatic confrontation, no last-minute interruption, just reality. Jane left that church with nothing in her hands, but one thing in her heart, the full weight of her choices. She had believed Sam would always be there, that she could leave, fall, and return whenever she wanted. But life had proven otherwise, and for the first time, she didn't feel angry. She just felt alone. Weeks passed after the wedding, but for Jane, time didn't move. It stalled. The church ceremony haunted her. Not because she wanted to ruin it, but because of how clean and final it felt. Sam had truly moved on. She had watched him say vows to another woman, the kind of vows he had once spoken to her, and this time she knew he meant them just as much, if not more. She never got to say what she rehearsed 100 times. Never had a chance to plead her case. But maybe that was the point. Some endings don't leave space for explanations, just consequences. Her life was quieter now, not by choice, but by force. She was evicted 2 weeks later. With no income and no safety net, she ended up renting a room from a former colleague who didn't ask too many questions. She started waitressing. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid for groceries. That alone felt like a small victory. Every so often, someone from her past reached out. Not out of warmth, mostly curiosity. The messages all sounded the same. "Heard about Josh. Rough. Is it true Sam's engaged to Laura? Wow, what happened to you?" Jane stopped responding. The mirror didn't lie. She looked like someone who'd lived too fast, trusted too recklessly, and fallen too far. But the pain had one unexpected side effect. It cleared her vision. She had spent years chasing the idea of more. More money, more excitement, more power. She told herself that Sam wasn't enough. Not because he lacked anything real, but because she couldn't appreciate stability when it was freely given. She saw now what he gave her. Patience when she was difficult, forgiveness when she didn't deserve it, belief when even she doubted herself. And she saw what Josh had offered, a fantasy built on flattery and fraud. What stung the most wasn't the loss of wealth or the social status or even Sam himself. It was realizing she had turned her back on someone who had never turned his back on her. Across town, Sam's life was moving forward. He and Laura settled into a rhythm, quiet, productive, peaceful. Their relationship was built on communication and mutual respect. Sam no longer carried the weight of trying to be enough. With Laura, he just was. He didn't hate Jane. That surprised him at first. But he realized hate required energy, and he had long since stopped feeding it. When Jane crossed his mind, which wasn't often, it was like a past version of himself. A different life. A man who had to be broken in order to rebuild stronger. They never spoke again, and that silence said more than words ever could. One afternoon, while on break from her shift, Jane saw another post from Sam and Laura, a vacation photo. They looked happy, relaxed, free. She didn't cry this time. She just nodded to herself. quietly. Choices have consequences. Jane could have built a future with someone who saw her completely, loved her through every insecurity, and stood beside her when things got hard. But she didn't just walk away from that. She scorched the bridge on the way out. Now she was building again, but from the ground up. No shortcuts, no illusions. Just truth. She started attending a small business workshop at the public library. Nothing major, but it was a step. She had an idea. Nothing grand, just something honest. Maybe one day she'd earn back some of what she lost. Not the lifestyle, not Sam, but self-respect. Because if this story taught her anything, it was that loyalty isn't just rare. It's irreplaceable. You can lose money and get it back. You can lose friends and make new ones. But once someone learns they can't trust you anymore, you've lost something you may never recover. Sam didn't punish Jane. Life did that for him. His revenge wasn't loud. It was quiet, measured, complete. He healed. He found love again. And most importantly, he found peace. Jane's journey wasn't over, but it would be slower now and harder. And this time, there would be no one waiting at the finish line with open arms. That's the lesson, isn't it? Betrayal doesn't always end in explosions. Sometimes it ends with a whisper, a door closing, a number deleted, a wedding you watch from the shadows, and the quiet realization that you'll never get it back.